All right, and we are live. Hi, Shiv. Hi, Matthew.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So we've gotten through our small technical glitches, and we are live now. Welcome everyone. Welcome to the second episode of On the Block, where we try and simplify and we help people understand better what all of these blockchain projects out there are about. What are they trying to solve? And more than anything else, try and just give a simpler understanding of what that means to us as users, right? Um, so as far as Streamer is concerned, now to put it in simple terms, I know it's a crowdsourced open source project that tries to what are they trying to solve, and more than anything else, trying to give us. Sorry, I had to stop there. I had my YouTube live running in the background too, guys.
Okay.
So we've heard it's trying to democratize data. It's trying to make our data more secure and also figuring out how to monetize that, right? And there's all these words around it. It uses IoT, it uses Ethereum, and all of these things. But what does that mean for me, Shiv? Quick introduction on you, and quickly, what does Streamer mean for me?
Yeah. Okay. So look, if you go and see the website, you'll see that we're involved in two things, and then I'm going to go into a presentation. The very first thing that we got involved in was building a network to port data. Right? You're like, oh, okay. Well, these things exist in the background. If you're an ordinary, like, non-developer, ordinary person in the world like me, then you don't notice any of this stuff going on. But if you use the BitTorrent network, you'll know that there are different ways of moving files around, moving, in our case, real-time data around, right? If you use pretty much any piece of social media, they will have to like instantly move data from one computer to another, right? Messages, as in. So the question is, how do you do that? And at the moment, like, Amazon basically runs that whole scene. So we're developing a network, or most of it, right? You can also create sort of open source solutions, but it means running your own server. So it's quite a hassle for developers to do all that kind of stuff. So that's a network. We're developing something that people can just plug and play into. It's very simple, and it really helps to facilitate the new world that's about to come, which is the world of IoT. I mean, it's already here with us. A phone is basically an IoT, the most popular IoT gadget in the world. We just don't call it IoT. And cars and connected gadgets at home, all of those things will need a way to sort of plug and play when it comes to moving data around, right? So that's one aspect of what we're doing. And the other aspect is, and I'm going to just now share, shall I share my screen and start the presentation? So It's about this future of data monetization. Because obviously, once people have data, and once people are, in a sense, one of the big problems is how do they actually control it? But once it's flowing, then the question is, how is it also sort of monetized? So I'm going to give a presentation really on what we've just sort of launched, which is our data union framework. And let me share that with you and then press play. There we go. I'm doing this without notes. My printer decided to not work for me today. So bear with me in case I stumble on one of the bits and bobs. But there we go. Look, so let me give you a kind of overview on the talk, and then I'll jump into this element. So I'm going to talk about the state that we're in currently with the data economy, and sort of, in essence, how, as you'll see and hear, how awful it is. Then I'm going to move to kind of how technically difficult it's been to actually find solutions to that. Then kind of how we managed to solve those issues and create kind of generic platforms. And then finally, I'm going to move into some kind of practical applications of how that actually changes people's lives on a huge scale. All right, so let's just talk about the state that we're in currently. Now, I'm guessing a lot of you here will have heard phrases like, data is the new oil, right? And you'll also have realized that there are a few big players who are basically in control of information. This is a picture of a panopticon. So it was a kind of a mind experiment, if you want, by a guy called Jeremy Bentham, who's like, how could we best design a prison? And some guys came along, I think in the 1950s or 60s, and they built an actual replica of this. But it also is really symbolic, if you want, of the data economy. So right in the middle of that are these data oligarchs, if you want, Google and Facebook, et cetera, who watch all of us and actually hoover up all of that information for very much their own benefit, right? You'll know most of this stuff, right, if you've watched the Social Dilemma or The Great Hack on Netflix, and that of course is you. Right? So you're in a very unprivileged position. You can only basically see Google and Facebook and have a relationship with them, but you don't have a God's eye view into what's going on everywhere else. So there have been lots of people that actually talked about creating this, vision for a better data economy. And they fall into three main groups. The first group is the open data people. So Tim Berners-Lee, about 8 years ago now, started a thing called the Open Data Institute in the UK. And that idea was that, look, just make all the data in the world available for everyone in the world to utilize, right? It's sort of, in essence, very much chimes with his internet vision. And if you don't know who Tim Berners-Lee, please look him up, right? The inventor of the internet, if you want, or the protocol behind it. The second group have been the privacy or death people, i.e. they say their vision is like, we should keep all of this information that we constantly share with these big, huge Silicon Valley players. We should keep it to ourselves, right? Because they're spying on us, right? The Electronic Frontier Foundation has been one of those groups, but also you'll have known and interact with lots of privacy tech that's out there, like DuckDuckGo or Brave as a browser, ad blockers, et cetera, et cetera. There's tons of this stuff out there. And the problem is, as we've seen also with the pandemic very much so, is that actually that group doesn't have much of an answer to if people actually do want to share data, right? So if they do want to, not too worried about their privacy and they do need to share data, then the tools that they've created don't really do that. And the philosophy that they've sort of instilled, including in legislation in Europe and around the world, doesn't actually facilitate any of that. Then there's been this third group of people, right, who've said, well, hang on, we do want to share data. And actually, privacy isn't just everything, right? Sometimes people also want convenience. People want services. And also, there's this thing about equity. Like, these people are getting very rich. So it really doesn't matter how private we keep things. They still keep getting a lot richer. And isn't there a way for us as ordinary individuals to share in some of that wealth, to benefit from it, and actually take that power and control away, right? So it's not just about privacy, very narrow privacy, right? There's something to do with that, right? So Andrew Yang in America, the Yang Gang, Yuval Harari, loads of other academics, they've been very disparate and not quite coordinated in many senses, but they all advocate roughly the same sorts of things. And it's quite exciting. And we find ourselves in that, if you want, in that group of people. So it turns out, why hasn't that ownership group been able to actually produce anything, any kind of decent products in the world that people are utilizing and using? Well, it's because data ownership is actually a technical nightmare to implement. So let me tell you this story to kind of explain why it's been such a technical nightmare to live in a world in which you as an individual get to own and control and share and monetize, right, and sell, if you want, or license your own data. So in the year 2000, which is 16 millennia away in technical years, if you want. There was a guy called Chris Downs, and he went and undertook an experiment. He's like, can I own and control and sell my own data? Is it possible for me to do that, right? And this is pre-Facebook, remember? So he's like, okay, well, he went to all the websites that he'd used, and he has a supermarket, credit card thing, loyalty card, and he'd been part of banks, obviously, so he downloaded all of the information that he could get his hands on, and actually some of it he had to print out and handwrite, right, because he couldn't even download and stuff. So he put that all on a USB stick and he sold it on eBay, and I think he got about $300, right, for that. And as I said, there's 800 pages of data and loads of other stuff. So he was reflecting on that in 2017. He's like, oh, that was a neat experiment, right? Back in 2000, right? Using eBay. But actually, it hasn't changed at all. Why hasn't that changed? The infrastructure is still the same. I'd still be using email and a USB stick and eBay. Why? Where is the infrastructure? We've advanced in so many fields in so many other ways, but not with this thing, right? So we had a look at that in 2018, early 2018. And realized that there were three basic problems, right? for individuals if they want to own and monetize their own data. The first thing is transport, right? How do you move the data around? Do you use email? Well, no, because that's ridiculous, right? It's never going to be WeTransfer. Like, what do you use, right? So you have to come up with some kind of porting network. The second thing is discovery. Like, if you're a buyer, you don't want to buy stuff on eBay. That's ridiculous. And obviously everyone has different file formats, and obviously you don't want to be haggling, like literally haggling with individuals on a one-on-one basis, right? So you really want to have one simple product bundled all together with thousands, millions of people all involved in producing that one single product, right? And you need a place to actually go and find it. So that's discovery. And the third one is payment, right? And you're like, hey, Shiv, like, what's the big deal with payment? Like, we have dollars, like, you can, just pay people. What's the issue? People have bank accounts. Well, the issue is that most of these things are micropayments. Like, your data at one point, like, on week one or week, in a couple of months' time, might only be worth a couple of dollars or even like half a cent, right? A couple of rupees, even less than that. And if you're trying to pay 1 million people, a couple of pesa, like that's impossible through the banking environment as it exists currently. So you have to use micropayments. So those are the issues. And they've plagued so many people. We spoke to lots of people who've tried to set these things up, and they all fall down on these points here, right? So one of the three always catches them out up to date. So we solved it. Well, fingers crossed. So we were experts really in as I mentioned already, network building. We're like, okay, cool. We know how to like port data around the world. We know how to move it from Australia to the UK to India to Germany to whatever. Like, we know how to do these distributed network, peer-to-peer distributed networks for real-time data, right? We can do that. The second one was marketplaces. Like, okay, we built a marketplace, and we also know how we could bundle data from lots of incoming sources, right? Lots of different people at lots of different times creating data. Like, we could put it into one product, so it was easy to purchase, right? And remember, these aren't static files. It's like a real-time flow of information. Right? So it's constantly coming at you as a buyer, which is great. That's exactly what you want as a buyer. And the third thing is that we had experience in cryptography. So we developed all these solutions. So, and we put them all together, and we put our know-how together to create what we call the Data Unions framework. Hopefully, if this works, a little video will play. I'll try and, there's no sound, so don't worry, but I'll try and speak over it quickly to see if I can catch up with it. Okay. So how does it work? Well, the Data Union framework is a new way to work with your users to crowd sell that real-time data. Build one, you'll need your own application, right? And creating a data union deploys an Ethereum smart contract to handle the payments. And you user join via your application, and the data union product is published to that marketplace that I was mentioning. And the user data flows via the streamer network, as I mentioned, directly to the buyers without any middlemen. So it just goes straight to them, which is great. Micropayments and data distributed to any number of users via that same Ethereum network, which is also great. There you go. I've never done that film before, so that worked. That was good. Oh, hang on. Let's go back out to the... Okay. So for those who are slightly more technically minded, or, you're like, yes, I like your fancy graphics, Shiv, but let me give me some harder information. Well, let's just look under the hood if you want. So you have data providers on the left-hand side over here. And they send that information to an application, right? Let's say that application is a browser plugin. It could be an app on your phone. Or it could be a piece of IoT. It could be your car, right? If you want, like a piece of software on your car. And that application then with, imagine lots of data providers, lots of people like you and me on the left-hand side, all using that same application, sending that information to the streamer network. So it runs locally if you want, and it sends it directly to the marketplace where a buyer unlocks it. Then the buyer obviously has to unlock it with something called money. So they unlock it, and that flows through a separate network, right? Through the Ethereum sidechain, which we've developed, and using obviously Ethereum smart contracting as a way of distributing that both to the administrator of the people who basically set up the applications and help sell the data. So they take a cut of that because they're like, okay, we set this up. Like, why would we do that otherwise? That makes sense. And they help you manage that data. And it also goes back to you, then, the money. So I hope that's clear. And obviously we've got questions coming up so we can dig into that. Right. So let's look at this in action, because that's a nice set of ideas. It's a nice piece of software, but is anyone actually using it? Right. So, well, the world's first data union, if you want, was called Swash App.io. And actually was started by one guy in his room like a year and a half ago called Ibrahim. And he saw what we were doing and was really like fascinated by it and thought, okay, you know, I could come up with an idea. So he created Swash, which is a browser plugin. So it sits in on your browser and basically asks you, look, what kind of data do you want to collect? And if you're happy to do that, then you go yes, and it starts paying you for all that information. The data that it's producing is incredibly valuable for consumer insights purposes. We don't have time to go into all of those elements of why it's so valuable, but maybe we can get to that in questions. And obviously people are already joining this. So it has around or nearly, I think, 4,000 members now, which is great, and hasn't even done any marketing. So it's going kind of all of this is organic growth. They've already got 4 members now, or actually 5 employees. And they've just gone out for VC funding, and that's starting to come in. So they're really getting off the ground here, and they're really very far ahead of the game. How that back end looked for Swash is they're the browser plugin, right? And they also are taking a chunk of that money when it starts to come in. And obviously the web users are the people like you and me who are the data providers. So we've also been working with companies like Bosch, actually with Bosch, I should say, working on the same idea for a car, because obviously cars are going to be giant computers on wheels in the very near future. So they're producing vast amounts of information, far more than in fact your phone would, in terms of roaming the environment with the number of sensors attached to a car, but also, you know, the inputs that you yourself as a driver will be inputting into that vehicle. So there's loads of information, and the question is, who controls that? Now, again, if you think about your household appliances, it's the same framework. So your washing machine or your fridge at home, you know, who owns and controls that data? Well, this system allows individuals to say, yes, I'm happy to license and sell that to, say, an insurance company or your electricity company or whatever it might be, right? Or the actually application maker themselves might, whoever makes that hardware might want to know, how's it going? How's your Jaguar I-Pace electric vehicle actually performing, right? Or your local garage might want to know, okay, well, it's broken down. We'll just send the vehicle out to repair it immediately. So all of this is really fascinating stuff. What are those immediate kind of or more obvious or wider benefits, if that isn't already clear? Well, one, Swash and other DUs will, I think, scale their user base and therefore be able to provide revenue to ordinary people like you and me. Quick sort of evaluation has given us that it could be, people always like, how much is my data worth? Well, upwards of $50, maybe $200 a year. That's a lot of money, depending on who you are, where you are, and obviously how successful each geographic area is in retailing to buyers. So it is dependent, but, you know, we're not talking, you know, $1 a year. We're talking upwards definitely of sort of $30, $40, $50 for people, which is great. But you don't need everyone to join a data union. You just need a sample or a panel size that gives you that correct sample that you can just scale out. Second thing, I'm almost done. So I talked obviously about mobiles, cars, IoT markets. Well, they're to come. So we've got people working on mobile applications to take data from mobiles, again with car and IoT. So for example, like Fitbits, well, you know, how do you own your Fitbit data and monetize it? Well, wouldn't it be great to be part of a data union, have people do that for you, and all you have to do is just click a few buttons and you're off. Well, that's in the works now, so that's great. Third thing is that primary market that I mentioned. So it's, you know, AI, people will want to buy this data. They're already knocking at the door actually of Swash, for example, hedge funds. But actually the biggest market is consumer insights. So it's companies like, say, for example, TripAdvisor or a hotelier. They're like, shall we build our new hotel in Japan? Or shall we build it in Korea? You don't know. So where are people going? Where are people traveling? They, at the moment, are very underserved because they can't get that information from anyone, including Google, right? Google keeps it to itself. This is when people talk about data silos. This is what they mean, right? Google's like, no, we won't give you that information. We'll tell you about you, but not like what else is going on in the industry, because that gives us our advantage when it comes to advertising, which is different from consumer insights. So people can't make those decisions, and they're desperate for that data. Okay, and then finally, as I've said, Silicon Valley's data is demonopolized, and this is brilliant because it means that application builders come along and go, great, I tell you what, we'll build a new map app. So you don't have to use Google or Waze. I'm not quite sure what the hot map application is in India. If it is Google, maybe Mithun can tell me. But yeah, it just adds to the innovation in the world because you can bind these data sets from data unions in real time and actually, really draw out that innovation. Or Netflix, imagine a Netflix data union for my final example. At the moment, Netflix knows what goes on its platform, but no one else knows how many people watched, like Bird Box or Schitt's Creek. That's a very funny program, by the way. You should watch it. And no one knows what's going on except for Netflix, and that gives them a huge monopoly power. Wouldn't it be great if other people in the world, like TV producers, knew, this is what's happening? So this data is incredibly valuable and will lead to innovation once it's demonopolized through data unions. Okay, I think that's it. I've probably gone on for too long. Any questions?
Yeah, I was thinking of just kind of going back to some of the stuff that you spoke about there, Shiv, before we kind of go into Twitter and questions from the audience here. But in the meanwhile, for everyone watching, any questions that you have, just put it in the comment section. I'll kind of flat it up on the screen, and Shiv and Matthew can keep answering it. We already have a couple of questions, but before that, you spoke about users currently who, say, if I'm a user who's willing to sort of be transparent with my data, right? I don't get incentivized for it today, right? Whether that's on Google or anywhere else. So part of the solution here is, if I, as Mithun, I'm okay with my data being out there, I at least get something in return. I get incentivized for that data, right? You spoke about the marketplace concept there, right? Because the data goes into some provider. We spoke about Google and Facebook being that middleman today, and the entire idea is to take away the middleman and have that revenue coming into users directly, right? What does that marketplace look like, right? Where does this data go?
So actually, the interesting thing is, until a buyer subscribes to it, it doesn't go anywhere, right?
Okay.
And this is this is the difference between, and this gets a little bit technical, and maybe Matthew wants to weigh in here, but ostensibly, the difference between a decentralized application like this and a centralized one is, if let's say you have, I don't know, LinkedIn on your phone. If you're using it, LinkedIn always gets that information, right? So they know what's going on, obviously, behind every move you make on the LinkedIn app. And actually, even if you use other apps, sometimes LinkedIn also knows, like Facebook famously knows what other things you're doing on your phone, even if you're not using the Facebook app, right? So that information usually is held by the central party, and then they can sell it or not if they want, right? In this thing, the data doesn't leave, like the Swash browser. It doesn't, the Swash plugin, it doesn't leave your plugin unless a buyer actually then subscribes to that and starts paying you for it, right? So
Okay.
Swash doesn't have the information. It doesn't have the information. No one else sees it. That's it. Unless someone's paying you for it, no one else sees it. It just goes to that buyer.
Okay, so let me get this right. So what happens is, I'm using the Swash plugin, and I'm just going to use Swash as a use case here, right? If I'm using the Swash plugin, what you're basically saying is that data is still sitting on my system, right?
Yeah.
And
in fact, it's not sitting on your system at all because it's not even stored. So it's just imagine if you just typed stuff and no one recorded it, right? That's like how the world should be. It was how the world used to be not very long ago. So it's just that, right? It just gets lost because no one is buying it.
Okay. And for anyone interested in sort of, I think we've covered like the non-technical bit of it, but for anyone interested in actually knowing what happens with that data, because we're talking now and we're saying, okay, the data isn't sitting anywhere. Then comes the question of, okay, where is Swash pulling it from and how does it work? For anyone interested in knowing that, are there resources that they can go and refer? Are there links that we can give people to kind of get a better understanding of what's happening there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting a bit technical. So the Swash app basically It's an extension on the browser, and you set the permissions that you allow it to view the data that you wish to send to Streamer. And basically, it is pushing that data into the Streamer network. I think what Shiv was talking about was that the Streamer network doesn't see the data. It is a trustless data transport protocol. So that means that the only people that see the data are the ones that buy the data. So Streamer itself doesn't have this panopticon kind of experience with the data, which is very similar to, which is very very different to how the Googles and the Amazons work. They can see the data. They have this monopolistic advantage where they can see everyone's data. We're building this new framework where we can't see the data. We are a trustless sort of middleman that transports the data in a kind of fair and democratic way. And the marketplace, sorry, Shiv, just to say the marketplace is not taking a cut. So it's not really a traditional middleman per se. The data sort of is there to be sold, but it's just a sort of neutral infrastructure there to facilitate the connection of the buyer to the seller.
Yeah, again, so normally what would happen is you have to give your data. Let's say you did in a centralized way, right? You give you're not even giving it because half the time you don't even know you're doing it. Like if you're using a font with Google, they actually know you're using not just that font, but what you write with that font belongs to them as well, right? So that's how pervasive this kind of centralized spying is in a sense. So we belong to the Web3 community, right? Mitten, do you have your phone there with you?
Yeah.
Have you got your phone? Yeah. Hold up your phone, right? Just hold it up. Okay, that's cool. What is that? What is that in your hand right now? Right? It would be a phone, right? But it's not a phone. It's actually a supercomputer, right? And the thing that I'm speaking to you on is also, we call it a computer. Yeah, but these things are like supercomputers compared to what we had 20 years ago, right? It's unfathomable amounts of computing power. And what do we use them for? We use them to plug in as interfaces with screens to other people's supercomputers, right? That's all we're doing. That's nuts, right? The people who originally built the internet and the original people who built like personal computers, PCs, right? They were like, the power should be with the individuals, right? We should use these machines to like be tools for us. And somehow we've now ended up in this place where all these tools are being used for other people, just as interfaces to suck information and wealth out from us, right? Your phone and your thing. These are massively important tools. So what we've gone back is to that original like idea. This is not just us, but the Web3 community. Like, so people should know this, like in the CoinDCX people. It's not just about making money, right? It's about doing things very differently, i.e. saying, let's run things locally on my phone or in my computer. Let's use my computing power to actually work for me, right? Not on this kind of cloud infrastructure that like gets hoovered up by everyone else. Does that make sense? That's just like a broader point.
Yeah, makes sense. And for people watching, Shiv did mention Tim Berners-Lee some time back, and he told you go look up who the guy is. That's basically the guy who invented the World Wide Web. Right. So if you really want to know what it was intended for, that's probably the guy you need to listen to.
Is Tim Berners-Lee a billionaire? No. And there's a reason why he's not a billionaire, because he said, look, the web should be just a way to the protocol, the HTTP, it's just a protocol, right? It's a way of like everyone using the same thing. Now, he could have sat there and said, I'm going to charge everyone for this, right? And I'm going to be sitting in the middle of this making tons of money. And no one would have used it because there were ideas like that, right? And no one else like followed them. And everyone's like, well, if you're going to make the money, I don't want to be part of your thing because you're going to win out, right? So, he's a fascinating guy. And what he did changed the world because he realized, right, it shouldn't always just be about making a ton of money by sitting in the middle and becoming a monopoly, right? Yeah. If you do it that way, nothing will work.
Yeah, and I expanded a little bit on this entire aspect of where does that data sit, because that kind of goes back to something that Shiv said during the AMA we had the other day. For people who tuned into that AMA, was the one of the things you said, the intent is not to become like this provider who's sitting on all of this data, so that you can then tomorrow start building out solutions by looking at what others are building, which is fundamentally one of the problems that people have with Amazon, right? As great as it is, that is a challenge that people have, that a lot of sellers face on Amazon today, isn't it? Like,
Right.
I could be selling stuff, but what's stopping Amazon from beginning to do that tomorrow? And I think that's also where the entire decentralization concept of blockchain and everything that's been built on blockchain comes in, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the thing, right? Like, I mean, I think Amazon, Jeff Bezos himself, like in the Senate in the US, like in July, was like, yeah, sure, if we see something that's doing really well, like, well, yeah, we'll copy it, right? And so what does that mean? It means, like, what's the point of trying to compete with Amazon? What's the point of trying to invest in things that might compete with Amazon? Because they can always, like, you're small, and if you want to get big, then they'll just undercut you at the point where it looks like you might succeed, right? They look at you, they look at your product, and they're like, it's doing really well. We'll just come out and make a copycat, right? Nuts. I mean, this is stuff like this is really important, as people have now realized.
Shiv, I just want to kind of go into one more use case before we go into questions. We have another half an hour for the questions, but I just want to expand it a little more just to ensure everybody gets what's happening. Before this session started, we spoke a lot about trying to make it as relatable and understandable as possible. One of the other use cases that I did see on your website was to do with Tracey and how that's making micro loans and capital more accessible to fisher folks out there in the Philippines, right? So one is the kind of stuff that happens with the data that we own, but the applications go beyond that, right? The entire concept of data unions and how that can be kind of leveraged, because there were a lot of questions around, how does Streamer kind of build out other applications in the financial services space and in the DeFi space and all of these things. If you could just explain to us about Tracey and what's happening with that, and also
Sure.
what is it translating into on ground?
Yeah, I don't know, Matthew. You wanna take it? I can take it if you want. Matthew's our head of development, by the way. So developer relations.
We never did we were so excited. We never did the introductions, but Shiv heads growth and Matthew heads developer relations.
Yeah,
So
I promise.
Growth and
here.
The technical aspects is Matthew.
Yes. Sure. So Tracey is a traceability app that we're deploying in the Philippines for fisherfolk. And the cool thing is that the fisherfolk themselves will be joining the data union, and when they catch a fish, they'll take a picture of the fish and record the location and parts, kind of details of the catch, basically. And that information is very useful for the basically the whole chain of supply up into the person that's eating his sashimi tuna or whatever. They are very interested to know the full chain of custody. And so this data has value. And it also has value to the fishermen because there's a big problem with loan sharks in the Philippines for these very small unbanked community. And basically they have a problem with showing a kind of like a salary, when we apply for a loan, we show us 3 months of pay slips, but they don't have that. They're catching fish, so they don't. So technology kind of provides this backstop where they can go to a bank and say, hey, I don't have a regular job, but I catch fish, and here is this data on the blockchain. And so we've actually partnered with Union Bank, biggest bank in the Philippines, and they are interested in this data. So not only is this data being used to kind of has direct monetization value, it actually has value in traceability and banking the unbanked. So it's quite a cool thing. So yeah, we're really excited about how this project will go, and I think we could roll it out to other destinations around the world as well.
Yeah, we were just telling Shiv the same thing the other day of like, India probably has one of the longest coastlines in the world. And fishing is big, and one of the real problems out here is people don't have documents, right? I mean, you need to get into the banking system. You need to be on the system. Like a lot of these people aren't on the current system, right? They don't have the documents.
Yeah, and everyone's dealing with in cash, right? So it's hard to keep account of all of this stuff. And I mean, one other thing to say: the other people who wanted the data, which is also why they supported this project and funded it, was the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF, because they were like, we'd like to know where these fish are caught, because for environmental reasons, right? Like how many are being caught, how much are we protecting these special environmental areas, et cetera, et cetera. And now they know that information, but 6 months later, right? So the paperwork does get filed and they get it 6 months later. And of course, fish move, right? So they quite like to know it in real enough time as possible, i.e. like a day, rather than, in 6 months time when it's too late. So they've supported the project as well.
Interesting. All right. What we're going to do now is, guys, we'll take the questions that have come in this live and the questions that we had on Twitter. We'll take as many questions as we can. I do have one job for the two of you, Matthew and Shiv. At the end of this, we'll have to pick the five favorite questions that you both find. Those 5 winners are going to walk away with some data tokens at the end of it.
Great.
I love being a judge for giveaway prizes. Sounds like a great way to finish a Friday.
Before we get into this, just this one last question that I had was the way this data gets monetized and how people get paid off, right? Does that happen with data tokens?
Yes.
That's with data tokens.
Yeah, so the way that data unions work is that this value is being accumulated on the smart contract. And so basically the smart contract is doing the accounting work, so that when a buyer comes in, they're interacting with the smart contract, and the smart contract is giving them access to the data, and it's also taking custody of the data coins. Now, the smart contract is also smart enough to distribute those data tokens to all of the data providers in an equal way. So yeah, it's the main point there. Yeah.
I might want to just add this, which is, look, all these data unions are using data tokens, i.e. Streamer's native token, to operate their data unions, right? And so, I shouldn't really mention this, but on Monday, we've got an announcement that's coming up. Because if we can get some really big consumer-facing data unions, they're obviously all going to be using data tokens. And one other interesting point about that is, most all of crypto, right? You'll soon find this out if you're not a crypto native. Is about onboarding people, right? How do you get them to swap their good hard like fiat for crypto in some way or another, right? This is completely different, right? You already do work. You do digital work every day, right? It's just that no one pays you for it. So now you do the same things that you do every day, like browse and surf the web, right? Use your apps, whatever it is. And suddenly these data unions are paying you in crypto, right? Because the money is coming from the buyers. They're doing the hard yards with the fiat. And that means that people are just getting crypto. Then what do they do with that crypto, right? That's the next phase, if you want, of our development. Like, can we build out more uses for data token in terms of like ways in which you can spend it, like micropayments for the news industry? And I'm a former Guardian journalist, so I kind of know that industry well. Like, wouldn't it be great to just like, when you've got this stuff on your phone already, you didn't have to buy it, you didn't have to do anything, you just did what you normally did. And you can start unlocking like the annoying like Wall Street Journal article or Forbes or whatever it might be, or Times of India. I don't know if they have a paywall, but you just want to unlock that stuff and just read it, right? Great. Like, you can start to facilitate a lot of stuff with micropayments. It's been a holy grail in a lot of industries, especially digital ones. But there's been no way to get these micropayment tokens to people, right? So this is a natural way in.
Makes sense. All right, guys. So I'm just going to bring up the first question. We'll do the YouTube questions first. I'm going to put up the first question on your screen. And while we're doing that, I'm just going to kind of put all the Twitter questions together as well. And here's the first one. Can you guys see it on your screen?
Yeah.
Great question. Matthew, you want to take this one? I mean, I can, we both know how to answer this one.
It's a common question, so maybe I can jump in with a quick answer, and Shiv, if you want to add anything at the end, by all means. So yeah, it's as we all know, the Ethereum blockchain is clogged up. First CryptoKitties, then now DeFi, and probably something new tomorrow. So it's a big problem, and I'm certainly not going to say it's not. And this is our horse so far. So we are we're blockchain agnostic, but we are on Ethereum. So these scaling issues do affect us. What I can say is that we can move to other side chains, other chains, and we also have. There's also some very still good rational reasons why we stay with Ethereum. And these are the developer tools, the developers themselves, the wallets, the exchanges, they're all on Ethereum. It would be crazy to move to a ghost chain. That is point number one. The second point is that we are working in side chains as a way to get around this scalability issue. So we wouldn't be able to do data unions without clever ways around mainnet transactions. So all the state of data unions is held in a proof of authority side chain that manages the accounting. Now, when it comes to the withdrawal, yes, we're still kind of tied to the limits of the Ethereum blockchain, but we're also forward-looking in this respect, because I believe that there is space for Ethereum killers to come in, and I think the ones that succeed will be the ones with EVM compatible chains, because we can very easily port our middleware. Essentially, that's what Streamer Network is. It's middleware. So we can move to a different different chain with the same EVM, and basically just kind of copy paste all our contracts over. So at the moment, yeah, it's a bit of an issue, but yeah, we do have options, and we are sort of kind of working with side chains to get around most of the problems so far.
Yeah, maybe only one thing to add on that. It's not really adding, it's just kind of, I mean, look, the party is with Ethereum. Just like, there's tens of thousands of developers working in and around Ethereum. And if people, it's a weird thing, like, there's other chains out there, of course, like Tron, for example, right? Like, if, it's like going to a party, right? You want to go to where the people are. And if someone else is paying you to come to their party and there's no one there, then you're like, no, I'm not going to go. That's just weird. Why would you pay me to go to your party? There's no one there. Like, so it's a bit like that, really, in many ways.
All right. DeFi keeps coming up. So I just read something Shiv had written on Cointelegraph, if I'm not wrong. It was on CoinDesk, right? On
CoinDesk,
DeFi.
yeah.
Yeah, he has pretty strong opinions about it. I'll just put up the link to that article on the comments for anyone interested. I'll get to that question to you. Your opinions on DeFi.
No worries. You only get to be an opinion writer if you have strong opinions. It's kind of like a qualifying thing, I guess.
All right, here's another one.
Okay.
That's a good question.
I can quickly say 2 points. Basically, there is client-side protection. So inside the extension itself, it is looking locally at the URLs. And for example, if you're on like a Dropbox private link, you don't want that sent to anybody except who you want to send it to. So in the extension, it blocks those. So you have like a blacklist of kind of sites that you don't want to get out. And secondly, what I would say is that Streamer by design is sort of has defenses in the data transport. Basically, the encryption from source to buyer is basically kind of that's our thing. We don't let anything kind of, it's tamper proof and it's censorship proof. So yeah.
Sense.
There are a few more other features that I would recommend downloading Swash and kind of looking for yourself and reading through the help bits and the more information section. So there's a lot there. In fact, they really thought about it. Those guys, they didn't take it
And I'm
lightly.
guessing a lot of this stuff, a lot of this information must be up on Swash's website as well, right?
Yeah.
If
it is.
anyone
Swash,
interested in knowing more, it's swash.io.
Swashapp.io.
Swashapp.io. Swashapp.io is where you can go check it out. All right. Yeah, Surinder, you had that question of, you're not able to see what data is collected, so that's already answered. You choose what data goes out, right? That's in your hands totally. You get to choose what data goes out, and data from what applications on your system goes out as well.
Yeah, they changed the interface slightly and made it sort of simpler. And so I think just in the last 2 weeks, I think they're going to try and go back to have an advanced bit in advanced settings, so you can really permission what's on and off. But as I said, like Swash is just one, slightly tangible a data union. But there are others coming down the line, ones that you can use on your mobile, for example. And that's going to be really exciting.
Matthew, we have one more question from you from a purely developer point of view.
Okay, as a developer point of view, how does the Streamer editor help developers to develop smart contracts with ease? So I would suggest that developers using the editor, we kind of call them canvases at the moment. It's inside the core app. And basically, canvases or the editor is a visual programming language. So it's pretty cool. It sort of fits the use case of anything that would fit into a script. You can put it onto a canvas and you can kind of build these logic blocks and connect them together and make something interesting. And how does that fit into smart contracts? You say, well, you can put in a smart contract block and then you can actually interact with the smart contract. You can do read and writes. So we can actually say buy Swash, buy the Swash data inside a canvas and have it actually display all the real-time data coming through. And there are oracles that you can build. Yeah, plenty of stuff. It's sort of like a Swiss Army knife sort of application, so you can kind of have a play and build whatever.
I think I've seen some interesting work with like event triggers, right, for smart contracts. So it's verges on the kind of Oracle use case. As long as you can trust that data source, then you can use that data source to trigger a smart contract to make payments or whatever it might be. That's been quite interesting when that's happened.
Exactly.
There's a very, very trading focused question here. I don't know which one of you is this one.
I can probably take that one. Go on. Well, yeah. What are the rewards for liquidity providers? Can we expect something like Uniswap in the future? No, not like Uniswap. No. I mean, not everything is Uniswap, and Uniswap wasn't, it wasn't CryptoKitties, right? So it's sort of one of those things where people are like, are you the hot thing now? Well, no, if it's already the hot thing, it's already gone in many senses. And we don't have liquidity providers in the sense we don't need, we're not a decentralized exchange, right? So none of that applies. What are we the hot thing for? And the answer is the data economy, IoT. So if you believe in a sense that like there are going to be more gadgets out there that produce more information, then this is the hot thing, right? And that makes it really fascinating. I mean, as I said, I think the bigger picture is, can you develop this ecosystem where, again, the promise of Bitcoin is buy the Bitcoin and then you can use it to transact, right? And it's not even that anymore because the Bitcoin developers know that it's just not going to be good for it doesn't work when it comes to transactions. It's not going to scale. It's never going to scale. So now they're like, buy the Bitcoin because it's like gold, right? Well, look, in the end, you have to buy something to use it as a transacting tool for money. But I think this is far more interesting. You just get it, right? You get Datacoin, you get an ECR20 token in your wallet, on your computer, right? In your car. And then what do you do with it? And that's fascinating. You're like, okay, we can swap it into money, sure. Or you can just use it as a native digital token. That's really promising, right? I think we're getting there. We're a couple of years off of like that happening, but we're getting there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say that liquidity providing is it's a big thing because it's sort of like free money. Well, we sort of provide free money in a way where your data is sort of free to use. So when you get paid for it, that's a sort of liquidity providing kind of parallel in our world.
All right. All right, guys. Local communities across the world. People want to know more, especially in the non-English speaking world, right?
Yeah, I think we've been really bad at that. I'm just going to be really honest. We focused on, we had our original site was translated into like 3 or 4 languages at one point, and it just got so difficult because every time we updated the website, we had to go back to like the Chinese translator or the German translator. I think it was also in Spanish at one point, and we were like, we can't change the website at all. We gave up, and then we were like, well, that's just stupid. So we stopped with the translations, and we've got a lot of resources that are actually either in German or Spanish. But I think it's a lot easier to do with a very simple product. We're not a simple product. We're targeting developers, and most of the people in the end speak English because that's the language, it's the lingua franca of development. Full stop. So. So I think that, we haven't done particularly well, but saying that we're now building out in India. So it's not just about the language thing. It's about who do you actually then target, even if they do speak English. So, I mean, Matthew, do you want to talk about the hackathon that's coming up?
Yeah.
Can we announce that?
So,
can we talk about it at all? Have I ruined something?
Hacker what? Yeah, I guess next week we'll be kicking off the India Streamer Data Challenge Hackathon, and so it'll be we'll be kind of promoting applications that are shaking up the data economy, building a new data economy on the Streamer platform. So yeah, I don't know if that was meant to be announced yet or anything. So
probably I think it wasn't. I think we're gonna get like a severe email.
That's next week. We're at Friday already. Everybody likes to go to slip on a Friday evening. That's all right.
Yeah. We're not live or anything. It's fine.
We've actually got 2 announcements coming next week. We've now ruined, I think, one of them. Oops.
Hey, this is just building up the hype. But tell me, guys, have you actually come across projects in India purely from the data economy standpoint that you guys are kicked about? I don't know if that's something that you want to let out, but have you been in touch with people building such projects in India? What have you seen?
So, I mean, people who are natively, in a sense, building data unions, there's few and far between in the world, full stop. Because they actually have to solve all of those 3 problems that I talked about in the presentation before they even start about like worrying about what the data product is, right? So it's a massively difficult enterprise. And so in a sense, we've shortened that whole journey for people. It's still hard to build one of these things, but it's not impossible anymore, right? It's not beyond the wit of a small development team now, which is great. So we've made that journey so much easier. We have spoken to specifically Indian companies about these ideas and taking them on, including in the mobile world. We had a series of really fruitful conversations. I probably can't name them, but with a big Indian mobile provider. Let's just put it that, like network operator. Okay. And talking to their strategy team and they were like, this is the future. Like, we agree with that. The question is, how do we get it done? And that's usually the problem. So people agree with us and they're like, okay, so you'll see more about that come next week, about those kinds of things and those kinds of developments. So stay tuned in that regard. But Matthew, I just want to hand over to you on this bit. I mean, that's what's been so exciting, right, about launching the framework is how much have we shortened that journey for people to create these data unions, and therefore, are we going to see 20 of them over the next couple of years or next year or 2?
I think so. Like going back to your original story about the guy that's printed out his eBay data, how difficult it was in the in our project lifespan, we've really worked hard at that exact problem, and now you need to be a developer, but you barely need any even crypto experience to build a data union. So really, the millions of developers in the world now have access to the tools and infrastructure that we have created to build these empowering data unions that will, shake up the monopolies. That's our game.
All right.
Yeah.
And make some money for developers. I mean, that's the other. Maybe we didn't mention that enough, but like Swash, the people who have founded Swash, they'll make they'll be in tune for tens of millions if this works for sure every year in revenue, if not more. I mean,
Makes sense. I think we've taken about 3 or 4 questions from here. We'll just quickly do a round of the Twitter questions, guys.
Wait, were we supposed to be also judging these questions?
Oh yeah, you are. I'll be sending it out to you at the end of this.
Oh, Matthew, man, you might have to do it.
Sure thing. They're good questions.
They are good. That's why it's tough. That's what I'm saying.
Hang on. Guys, I'm just going to put up the questions on our private chat, so you should be able to see it on your right-hand side. You'll see the private chat. Right?
Okay.
So here's the first one.
You want to read that out, Mithun?
Yeah. So this question is, in cryptography today, the most important and practical issues are liquidity, storage, availability, and scalability. How does data token solve for these problems?
I can take a stab,
Matthew.
Shiv.
I can also take a stab. I mean, look, the liquidity issue is not a problem for us, so we can maybe take that off there. And I'm not quite sure what you mean in terms of storage, so maybe we want a clarifying thing. But availability and scalability. Okay, like scalability is probably the easiest thing to talk about. Matthew, maybe you want to talk about the network and how it scales, because it gets quite technical, but it's really fascinating stuff. And on the payment side of the scalability, we basically had 2 constructs. We had this thing called Monoplasma, which we developed, which is sort of a side chain. I mean, it's called Plasma because it's a plasma type chain. And that was our first solution for scalability of payments for data union. The second thing is basically we've created a sidechain, like it's a full-on sidechain, and we've dumped the Monoplasma thing now for this next development, which is 2.0, which is due to come out in like a month and a half or something like that, give or take. And the bridging technology. So when you can run your own sidechain. And the question is that, like, well, how do you get it back to the main chain, right? Where everyone else recognizes the amount of money you have, basically, right? Move it from one database to another, and then for that to be a truth on the other database, if you want. And the technologies of that have got so much better over the last couple of years. So we're using now proof of authority bridge. So basically on our sidechain now, to make these payments to millions of people, and it's unidirectional, remember, so it's only going one way. We don't have to worry about those issues. Then we're fine on scalability. We're more than fine. It should scale to millions of people without any problems.
I would just say that you can't put heavy amounts of data on the blockchain, maybe not even for another 5 years or 10 years. So we built our own network that can handle real-time data at scale. So that's sort of what we do. We're a middleware for blockchains.
Tokenomics then. So the second question is...
Tokenomics. I've just brought it up on your screen.
Great, you got it on the screen, okay. So look, there's 2 main uses of the token. I mean, there's lots of sort of sub-uses if you want, but there's 2 main ones. One is for payment, as a payment mechanism on the network, right? So if you publish or subscribe to a message on the network, you're a user. And the people who will be network operators, obviously, will be providing the computing power, so they will get paid, right? So imagine, again, if you ever used the BitTorrent network, like everyone's involved, but everyone's doing it sort of for free. Now imagine if people were getting paid to do that, because like there were just a lot more like files to share, right? And it was like a professional thing, smart cities, right? And whole IoT networks. Well, okay, so people need to get incentivized to do this, otherwise and just do it like just to cooperate. So that's where data token comes in, right? If you want, it's a bit like mining and and doing that kind of thing. No one's just going to mine for free because it's fun, because it takes up a lot of power and stuff like that. The second thing is a payment we've already talked about, is a way, just a simple way of paying people for the data that they use, right? So not for using the network, but for literally subscribing to the data themselves at the end as a buyer. So paying for the products that are created. And then obviously through a data union, again, it's data tokens used there as well. So it's a utility token, but also just as a means of payment. So it covers both those bases if you want. Matthew, is that right? Would you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it.
Yeah. We might bring in staking as well onto the network. Henry, our CTO, CEO, like co-founder, if you want. He's like, we could do this. So it's in the balance where you have to stake to become a network node, to run a network node.
Were you supposed to let that one out too?
yeah, that I can let out. That's right. That's like an open conversation in the background. Like, we don't know. It's not difficult. That's the thing. The question is, would it put people off from being network and like node operators or not? And probably would be the answer at some point. Like, not the ones at the beginning, because they all know us, so we could help them out. But then like in the middle, it'll become really difficult. So anyway, conversations.
Yeah. All right. Guys, we are out of time, but I'm going to wrap this up by just asking both of you this one question, right? So data tokens went live on the CoinD6 platform. We also have a trading competition happening right now. For those of you who haven't yet participated in it, now is your chance. I think we just went live with day 2 today. So jump in, participate. But guys, from both of you, what is your hope for Streamer for the coming year? Also, a big part of it rests on just usability being scaled up, right? And more projects kind of using the framework and adopting Streamer, right? What is your hope for the coming year? And also, currently, what are the challenges? Because we spoke about the current monopoly, and and we all know it's a challenge. Right? So putting you
I was like, no. I'm not disagreeing with the question. I'm like, that's a big question. Like, when we've got no minutes left to answer.
I'll just quickly say that my hope is that data unions become the next DeFi. I think that's our goal. I think we can make it happen. I think we can make these data apps as successful as any other data app. So yeah, it's where my head's at.
Okay, so two things. One would be, yes, like a really big enterprise-backed consumer-facing data union, I think is on the cards. And so again, more news coming down the line on that. And then the network, just like we carry on with our development and get to the point where it becomes a kind of fully automated network with the payment protocol integrated. Like, I think we might get there possibly by the end of next year if you want, but it'll probably take a little bit longer than that, which is actually still ahead of our timeline, so that's good. Challenges, so many challenges. What you can't, like, we need a whole new session for that. Everything's a challenge. It's really, you know what, some advice, or some kind of learning, if you want. When I got into this space, it was 2017, and it was like May. It was early on, and then I started working for Golem, like, I don't know, June, July, or something like that, maybe a bit earlier. And everything was wild, and the ICO boom was nuts. It really was nuts. Like, it was, and I was day trading as well at points, and getting 10x like within a month, not a problem. Like, that was just ordinary day at the computer screen, if you want. And it was quite clear that there was going to be like a lot of failure, right? Because not everyone could win out, like everyone who's raising money in those ICOs. And I think we've started to see like a lot of projects come out into the wash where they've quietly kind of failed. Some have been honest failures, and some have been just scams to start with. And I think, like, therefore, if I was going to say anything to the people on the other side, like, who are trying to pick good projects and be wise about this stuff, is look at the people. Yes, study the white papers. Don't follow the crowds necessarily at all. Lots of that stuff is just feverish day trading, like mania. And I wouldn't want that back. We've learned our challenge has been like keeping the project together, keeping a good project vision on track, keeping those people, like keeping everyone sort of focused. It's really hard, even with the money that we raised, like 30 million USD. It's been really hard. But we're still surviving. We're still here. We're thriving now, and we're feeling like, we're on the precipice of something really amazing.
Sure. Makes sense. All right, guys. That was my last question. Thanks a lot, Shiv and Matthew, for taking the time out. And I'm hoping we did a better job of kind of just trying to simplify this. The entire effort has been to sort of, really simplify it and make people understand what these different projects in blockchain are about in their context, right? And what it means for you as a user. I think we definitely had some improvement from where we started. We'll hope to try and get better, and hopefully we'll talk sometime soon, guys. Maybe when that enterprise application happens, I'll keep an eye out. You said next week, right?
Next week.
Maybe we can catch up again.
I'm sure we can. I really enjoyed it. So thank you for having us on. It's been really, really great.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Shiv, again. All right, everyone. Thanks a lot. We will be back next week again. If you have suggestions for us on other projects out there that you're super interested about and you think more people should know about and they need to be simplified for people out there, do leave your suggestions in the comments. I promise to pick it up. Matthew, Shiv, you're in the ecosystem. If you guys have come across other stuff, people doing interesting stuff, let us know. We'd like to kind of bring them on board as well.
Absolutely.
Will do. Yeah, there's a lot of.
All right, everyone. Have a great Friday evening and a great weekend ahead. Bye, guys.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye. I'll send you the questions, guys. You'll have to pick the top 5.
Great. And thank you to the community. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, we had a lot of good questions coming in. I know we couldn't take all of it, but at some point I'll try and bring Shiv and Matthew back for another session.
Okay.
All right. Good night, guys. Bye.
Oh, he's really gone.
Oh, we might still be on. It's just us now, so maybe we should go. Bye, guys.